Okay, let's call to order this meeting of the Sylvania Planning Commission Commercial Business District Subcommittee. Do a roll call.
Dawn,
Present.
Sandy, not present. Elena, not present. Ecola,
Here.
Jamie, is not present. Leslie,
Here.
Walt,
Here.
Marcia,
Here.
Jerry is not present. Allison, here. And then Vivian, can you hear us?
Yep, here.
And Chris Lithine is not present.
All right, this could be our last meeting. Just gonna go over what our, and review what has been put together for our packet to present to planning and zoning, right? That's our plan. Where do we want to start here? I don't think we need to go review any of the whole business. Let's start with page 2 of 6. General recommendations for Title 18 in the Commercial Business District. The first topic is district name evaluation. The recommendation that will be going to planning and zoning is to remove commercial and focus on business district. Name examples that were given: Central Business District, Waterfront Business District. And then evaluate the purpose of having commercial in the district name. Any more business, anything else that needs to be discussed on that topic?
The only thing. If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yep, I'm just going to clarify. So we're 1 and 2 are being submitted to the planning and zoning, and they'll take it from there. Or are we still trying to define the name?
My understanding was that we were just giving suggestions. I don't know.
Okay, I was just clarifying. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if there is a consensus on which one to do, we can forward that as the primary recommendation. But if there isn't, we can put forward what's been discussed and what are possibilities. I think it's up to the group.
Okay. Dawn, you had more?
I did have a comment. The one thing about the Waterfront Business District is that not all of the businesses and all of those properties are waterfront. So I don't think that that's an appropriate title for looking at.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be pretty cool for me to be able to say I'm in the Waterfront Business District.
Oh, careful. That could require flooding.
And with that, there is a precedent. If you look at the Waterfront Commercial Residential District, it does include properties that are across the street from the waterfront.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Okay, do we want to strike that phrase then? Waterfront Business District, do we want to strike that? Or recommendation or leave it?
I would say strike it.
I would take it out.
Okay. Do we want to come up with a primary recommendation or leave the suggestions as they are?
Personally, I would go for number 2, just because I like the way it reads better. But either one, P&Z will look at it, and then council will look at it also.
Vivian, are you referring to the district purpose or the name?
Oh, sorry, name. Are we on purpose or are we on name?
No, we're on name. So the one that you'd prefer is the business district without the waterfront in it?
It's number 2 where it says commercial business district. The district is intended to be a community center for Sylvania, serving locals and visitors alike. We aim to foster a concentrated area of commercial business, including shopping, That's what I was referring to.
Okay, and as far as the district name evaluation, we're just gonna strike the waterfront business district and this stick with the central business district. Is that the consensus, what I'm hearing?
Well, I would like to maybe even simplify it to business district.
Yeah, because it seems like commercial and business together are almost redundant. So business district or central business district, I would be happy with.
I would like business district myself also. Is that, do we think we want to make that our primary recommendation then, is business district?
Go with that.
That's
Yeah,
fine
I'm
for me.
good with that.
I like city center, but I'm not gonna be there for.
Thank you, Walton.
I think from a staff point of view, there is an advantage to having central in there because we already have a commercial district, which I know
Right.
this is business, but then we have commercial. So, so what is the difference in evaluating that? But that might be more of a big picture to evaluate all of the districts and their names in the future.
So you like central,
I think that it specifies location and the district, but
there might have been a reason. Being that central.
yeah.
So we can say that
Okay, or city center?
Now you'll have to get
We
it
can
into the
offer
business district.
city center,
City center.
business district, central business district.
Yeah, I think that those are good three choices.
So we have city center, business district, and central business district.
Yes. Okay, and then on to the next bullet is update the purpose of the commercial business district purpose.
Okay, we'll strike one of those purposes out of there.
So this looks like we're just updating what it means, right?
Correct.
Right, okay. So number one is commercial business district. This district is intended to foster a concentrated area of shopping, entertainment, office facilities, restaurant and tourist-oriented development, and accommodation in a compact, convenient, and pleasant pedestrian-oriented community center for visitors and locals alike. And that one was suggested by Acola. And then number two, commercial business district. This district is intended to be the community center for Seldovia, serving locals and visitors alike. We aim to foster a concentrated area of commercial business, including shopping, entertainment, office facilities, restaurants, and tourist-oriented development and accommodation in a compact, convenient, and pleasant pedestrian-oriented center. That was also suggested by Acola. Where were Elena's suggestions? Where did they fit in? I'm sorry. Maybe we should address that first.
Her suggestions were about. Here they are on page 3 under the consider including short-term rental.
Okay.
I don't.
Did you have a suggestion for definition?
Not on that, I guess.
Not on that.
It was on something else.
No, I don't
Wanted to
think
make
she
sure
did,
we
yeah.
didn't need to include that first suggestion. Because she did have suggestions, and I do think that we should include them, you know, wherever they were supposed to be put in. So those will when we come to that, we'll plug them in there.
Do we want to read what the current commercial business district purpose is?
Sure, if you'd like.
The current purpose says the CB district is established to provide an area for convenient, attractive, and concentrated commercial development. Regulations applying to this zone are designed to encourage a compact group of business of the type which are mutually beneficial and located close enough together to encourage walk-in trade.
I like number 2.
Yeah.
I think it's prettier. Sounds good, and it says that all in one. It says that same thing too. The only comment I would have is, I think we should put where we're gonna outline those different things. When we need to make sure and put in there, but not limited to, or something to that, because you can't ever cover everything in a short paragraph, so I think it's important that you don't close any doors.
So we aim to foster a concentrated area of commercial business, including but not limited to. Yeah, thanks.
Let's add that in.
Okay, and then, so we're on to the third bullet. Remove land use headers in the land use table.
Could somebody elaborate why is that in there?
So I think I was the one who brought that up, and it just was kind of it was another line that didn't really serve a purpose, but when I'm looking at it, we do need to define what the abbreviations are for, but it was just to kind of shorten things up and make it a little easier to read. It's my thought process in that.
In the normal land use table, they do have a key to say what is permitted and secondary.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that was to eliminate the titles of commercial land use types and industrial land use types and
Yes,
combine them
yes.
all, right?
Yeah.
So by removing them, then do we make it clear to the public and to the staff? I guess I would direct that.
It already defines them at the top of your.
I think we would just have to maybe alphabetize. They're not in this land use table. The headers were just removed, but if it was reformatted that way, we can structure it better, and then it would actually match the definitions in the definitions section a little bit better chapter, because they would be in order.
I think that would be great to have it alphabetized.
Yeah, they're just not here because they were
Yeah.
by type.
But yeah,
Okay.
So it just shortened it up a bit.
yeah. I mean, we already address whether it's a residential thing by having the columns, whether it's permitted in residential. Like you can see where it's permitted in what zone,
Is that clear across all of the?
Well, there's overlap on all of them, so you can have business items. Like here, commercial land use types, and then it has commercial land use things, but some of them can also be in the residential district.
So we already cover it by, if you just follow your column down for your specific district. Rather than more than one spot.
I like that change. I remember it being confusing the first time I was going through the table, not having seen it before.
I do also, depending on how it's formatted and how often there's a break, it would be nice if the header that has the key showed up again, so you didn't have to continue to follow, like, okay, well, I needed to know waterfront commercial residential is the third column over, so I have to make sure I remember. But I wanted to compare it to this, just like having it as a reference every so often is helpful.
Right, I like that too.
Yeah,
If it just ends up being a header on each page.
well, that's where it is there, but you want the key as well. Is that what you're saying?
No, see, so
No,
this
the
is what you have to do so it prints out on different pages, so that this header right here shows up at the top of each page.
Yeah, it's.
It is in this new printout.
Yeah. But I think that was the intent, that maybe
It was, it's just when the code changes. Or like published, sometimes it changes.
Yeah.
And it might actually also have something to do with the way that your printer prints too sometimes.
In the page settings.
Uh-huh. All that fun stuff.
Okay, so moving on, consider including A not applicable in the land use table key.
I like that.
I do too. It's very like here, you don't have to worry about it after this point. You don't have to do any research or anything, or it just says that. Bam, that's it.
So the determination has been made and it's stated, so it makes it clear.
Yes. Okay, anything else on that topic?
I don't know if this would be the point to mention it or not, but I do think it would be nice. You do have one in here that says with administrative permit. It'd be nice to have something added to the key, like the not applicable, another short abbreviation for when there's a situation where you have a permitted use by the city, like the city will grant you a permit or you file an application or whatever that is. Instead of having to type out with administrative permit, having a shorthand for it.
Perfect. That was new to put that in there like that because we didn't have it in there before. So that's a great suggestion.
And if something comes up in the future, we already have it.
We could do an A.
I like that.
Okay, moving on, evaluate warning periods for penalties in general.
That's something that came up in the beginning of the discussion and then really wasn't discussed further. So I don't know if that's something the group wants to discuss
I
further.
think I brought that up.
I mean, it's a valid suggestion, right? To have them evaluate. Is there anything specific? you
Well, I
wanna-
don't know what the system is now,
Mhm.
but it seems reasonable that you would have a 30-day warning and let the person correct it. And then, like in Leslie's case, where you have a house that hasn't been worked on since the 70s, it might take 2 years to create what we're trying to create. I mean, do we find them in the meantime, or do we consider that?
Okay, just take into consideration that there's progress being made. I mean,
Correct, as long as you're making progress. And then my last thing I would say is, and this would be the most important one to me, that it be done equally. Because the minute you come find me, I'm gonna say, hey, there's this place here, I've been here 10 years and I've never seen any activity in it.
Right.
So to create a two-tier system, it's really important to me that warning, time to create what you're creating, and equal distribution of the law. Those are three really important things to me, and a reasonable fine.
So in the thought that we have kind of a 1 year once you have a building permit, do you think that that would be applicable? Like enough time frame to show progress in that?
If you've got a 70-year-old contractor, no.
well, again, it has to be equal across the
Well,
board.
so the 1 year building permit is that you have to have progress within 1 year. And then as long as the progress is carried through within the 2 year period, it's applicable. It's if progress stops and ceases for a year, then you're no longer in compliance with the building permit. You may have to ask for an extension to do it.
So it's, I'm sorry, if I may.
Yes.
Yes, well, it seems like with our building permit and the amount of time that we make it allowable, that's kind of setting the stage for people who want to do remodel, and they have up to 2 years in the permitting process to get it done. And, to encourage people to, have the business and have their home in the same space if that's what they choose to do. So I think with the permitting process, if we had a 2 year situation, just that, that you are in compliance within 2 years, it seems doable. I'm not sure. And then Walt's comment about warning period or letting somebody know they're not in compliance, 30 days is, if not longer, would be satisfactory. But do we want to write this in, or we want to send it to council or the P&Z and council to have them discuss it? Because this was one of the huge issues that council was having issue with, how to apply penalties, if we apply penalties, and how to go about it. and to encourage the business district to be just that, a business district. Just my thoughts.
This is Dawn, I guess to me, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made before you even get to this point. And I would assume that that would be decisions and discussions that are had at a council meeting, certainly not here, because you can't even start to talk about penalties and enforcement until you have it just gets really sticky. I don't see how you do that in a manner unless you just start completely over and this is how it's going to be from here forward, because there's been so many different ways that it's been handled previously. And I mean, it's back to the same thing. I think I've said it a lot of times, is you cannot force somebody to lose money. And if they can't afford to run a business in a property and they can't sell their property, how do you impose a penalty on them? In what sense does that make? So, and then the flip side to that is, if you're not going to force it upon them, then how can you enforce it upon somebody who is starting to try to do something business oriented? So to me, you go back to that, you try to promote business the best way you can, and you do it in a positive manner rather than the penalties and enforcement that at the end of the day costs everybody money and time. And I don't know that you end up with a different result other than people that are annoyed with you, and that does not foster a good business environment for anyone.
Right, so it sounds like this is going to go back to P&Z and council, and then a determination being made at that level. Sounds like with input, which is fine, the legislative part of it.
Right, so this is just the recommendations of the group. It'll go to planning, and then planning will have to draft a draft ordinance and go through this whole process again. And then upon then they would recommend it to council. And then that draft ordinance would go to council, or they could choose to just do their recommendations and send it to council, but preferably in the past, they would do the draft ordinance. And then the council would get it and it would go through the public process again and the council discussion.
This is Elena speaking. This may well be outside the scope of this meeting, but considering how long it takes to get supplies here and how expensive everything is would there be any interest in actually making that more like 5 years, as long as progress is happening? I don't know if that's something worth even visiting right now, but I would think that 2 years is pretty quick turnaround for having invested a bunch of money into a new property and then needing to invest more money if it was a major build to revamp it.
Well, they as long as they continue working on it. And then they're supposed to close out within the 2 years, but then they can contact the office and say they need an extension to continue going.
Is
So
this
it's
for
making
all
progress.
districts or just commercial
Yes.
business?
This is all districts.
Yeah.
So, it depends on
For the building permit.
for the building permit. So it depends on how in depth you guys want to get. Right now it's a generalization just to evaluate that. And it sounds like from Councilmember Rojas, and from what I've heard in the past, that's definitely something that is on their minds. On how to look at that. So I guess it just depends on how in depth you guys want to be with your recommendation, or just leave it in there as a reminder that that's something that does need to occur, or a recommendation for something that should be looked at.
I like
I don't know, my personal recommendation would be to incentivize rather than penalize, like you were
There you
saying.
go.
So maybe we could put that in there
As-
as part of
As our
the,
recommendation.
when they're looking at.
Yeah, I think if we get too strict, it's like, how fast can I put up a for sale sign? And then you can't penalize me at all, because hey, no, I got it for sale.
Mhm.
So I think that's what we're up against. I think to what Nicola just said, it's better to do it sweetly than beat somebody.
So maybe evaluate warning period for penalties and how that incentivize.
Between.
Which the city has worked on prior, so we have that in place. It just needs to, so in the wording, yeah, it could go in there, but for all of you who don't know, the city has been trying that very thing. to give people a break somehow to encourage business.
Okay, on to our next recommendation was to rezone properties on the other side of the Gateway Pavilion. And what was the recommendation was to completely take them out of the business district or give them a different district?
I thought that
I
we
was-
determined that was out of the scope of this.
No,
No. We
Our
can
scope
talk-
said the size and shape of the district was one of the things we could recommend. And so that was I had recommended that, and basically because when I look at Seldovia and I think of the business district, when I go around that corner, it is no longer the business district. It just doesn't feel like,
Well, because they're not operating this, but
right, they're not. And there's a lot of residential there, and right across the street is waterfront commercial residential, I believe. So I would just say, make that all waterfront commercial residential, and it can still be business because you can have everything in that district.
You need to
It's,
remember that, you need to remember that that area way back when was zoned with, as all the waterfront. I think you can leave it there, but I think it's a discussion that needs to go to P and Z. And with your spot zoning, those 2 lots, there are 3 lots. I'm not sure what the Fiend's on the far end. She's got a business going now, bless her heart. And then on the boardwalk, you've got Time on the Boardwalk. So it is a continuation of the businesses in Seldovia. But I'm not really sure if we can actually just spot rezone. And personally, I'm not in favor of it. And so going to the public process for discussion, I think that's important. But there's a lot more to it than rezoning an area. And this is anyhow, my take on it. Thanks.
Walter?
I maintain it goes, if you go to page 33, it goes right along with what you already have in your land use comprehensive plan. Whoever was on that board, Jim Hopkins, Russ, all of them, and it's really plain if you look at it. It is in the comprehensive plan, and everything we're trying to do here is line up with that comprehensive plan. And also, I think okay, we limit short-term rentals or something, I put 3 pool tables in that bottom of Leslie's house, and I rent them for parties. How's that gonna affect the neighbors across there? We turn the music up real loud and it just, I think you need to keep the integrity of the other side of the street. I think those have always been houses. I don't think they're still allowed to be business in Leslie's case. It's really not going to change anything because it's still allowable in the SLU district. I think that some of that, just from the way we landed on Chris, I think some of it sounded a little personal. And I think that needs to be taken out, period. I think we should take a hard look at what Russ and all these guys did with all the commissioner signatures on an approved comprehensive plan. And all you got to do is look at page 33 and you'll see those 3 lots in the SLU district along with the boardwalk. And that's my take.
So then to move forward with that, because it was a recommendation made, but it isn't something that we decide, so then that goes the same as the other to the city council. Is that how that works?
Planning zone.
everything is,
Zoning first.
everything is going to planning and zoning first. Planning and zoning will get this final document and then they'll go through and make a determination for a draft ordinance and then that will go to council. So if there's not a consensus of the group, it can be removed or it can just be put in there to evaluate the properties on the other side of the pavilion. For zoning.
For planning and zoning to evaluate that.
Yeah,
Because I guess I do not think that it is good for either opinion for that to be decided here because it's not really gonna be decided. It's just,
It's just a recommendation.
yeah.
right, and so,
There, you gotta remember you're an advisory group. Everything is just a recommendation.
so change that to just to evaluate rezoning of properties. But,
yes.
and,
Can't tell them to do anything.
from Brandy's comments, she wanted us to be more specific on the properties that we were mentioning, so we can put in more specifics to those 3 properties to make sure that it's clear in the report which ones that we mean.
I can pull up Kenai parcel viewer and give you numbers. You want me to go get the great big map? I got.
No, I can do that offline, but I'm just, that was something that she requested after looking at the draft.
Not taking personal out of it. I personally think, I just think it sets a bad precedence. Like, we have these zones, these were put in place by people before us that made these decisions for our community. And if something isn't working in that spot, or people aren't deciding to do what those zones intended them to do, be like, oh, it's okay, we'll just rezone for you. That's not working, let's just change it. I don't know if we want to do that. Open that door in our community.
Well, this is just a recommendation. We can't, it's up to planning and zoning to decide if they want to do anything at all.
But if there's a more majority in this room to remove it and not have that as a consideration. I mean, hearing from the people here.
Well, I don't think that just that we're haphazardly taking something and deciding we don't like it, so we're going to change it and change the zoning of it. This was, like Walter said, a comprehensive plan that the whole town spent like years on. This was their ultimate plan for Seldovia. And right there on the map, it says they zoned it to where it was cohesive with the rest of the town. Everything flowed. And it was signed off on with the commissioners and everybody that all agreed that this was the perfect plan for Seldovia. And so it's not like we're changing years old tradition, by golly, and it affects me directly. I'm like one of 3 people that's being talked about. So I like to think that I want to have my say a little bit. And it's not like we are changing anything other than that's what already been talked about. It's what's already been planned, and input from hundreds of people over time and saying, this is what we like. This is how we see our future. And to think of it as only like a wish list or something like that. No, it's been talked about. This is what we want. So why haven't we done it? There's probably tons of things in that comprehensive plan that could have already been taken care of a long time ago, and nobody wanted to take it on, or it just kind of got forgotten. And that was one of them. And it could have been decided because everybody already agreed that's what they wanted. So I don't know. I vote. If you want to take a consensus, I'm consensusizing right now. That's what I would like to see for myself.
Okay, so
May I?
so this is just, I'm gonna say that again. This is just a recommendation that is going to go to planning and zoning. We, as a committee, cannot do anything. So right now, I think that rather than just keep beating this to death, we should just take a vote and on whether or not we want to leave this recommendation in or strike it.
Well, I don't mind it.
Then-
I don't mind it being left in because the planning and zoning is going to have to look at it anyway, whether we all agree or don't agree. It's going to be looked at and they're going to decide anyway. So it was whether or not we ask for a rezone or we evaluate. Those were our 2 options. And so maybe I misunderstood. I don't know.
I mean, you have the option to remove it entirely. It's up to the group.
That's what I'm proposing, is that there be a vote of the group and that there is a complete, not a complete consensus, but a majority consensus on whether or not we want to leave this in our recommendation or strike it.
If I
So-
may. Oh,
Yes.
I think this is something that has confused me, and I wonder if it's confused other people working along. Is how we deal with when there is varying opinion. I think for the most part, we've really been exceptional at agreeing on most things, but we have a large group, and I don't think that anyone expected that we would agree unanimously on every point here. So first of all, pat on the back to us for getting through everything. And second of all, what I've been asking a couple of times, what is that process if we don't agree? Do we put forth multiple recommendations on here? Do we vote and give the majority vote recommendation? What is the process that we want to? And the answer that was given to me, at least by the city, was that this can be done any one of those ways. So maybe we as a group decide which of those ways we want to do it. Whether it's a vote, whether we're putting forth multiple recommendations, or if there's other alternative ways that can be dealt with. I don't think it's realistic that we will all have the same opinions.
I think it'd be great to put it forward to the planning and zoning, since I'll have to look at it again. Knowing these different feelings, that it's a precedent that is set, and also that it's a idea that a lot of people support. And so
I'd say we leave it
I
at their
agree with
to
that.
evaluate.
I think Allison and the planning and zoning should look at it and decide what they think is best for the town.
I've kind of had an idea I shared with Heidi about possibly from the pavilion to the little playground. Is to bringing the boardwalk up to the street level and putting those little kiosks and some added businesses. Sort of like what you see when you go in the Homer on the spit. Which would demand a zone change, I'm assuming. Somewhat, maybe or maybe not, I don't know, but it would fill in a lot of extra commercial, small commercial that people can afford to put little buildings there. That maybe they can't afford a $500,000 building, but they can afford a little building to put a concession, which might fill in a lot. And I think if we did that, that would give you ample more commercial. And I've actually measured it and see where you won't affect your parking and Jerry's already trying to push this boardwalk anyway, so why not make it something that's really usable? And I was actually went as far as to have an architect do some little sketches, but I've never got anyone interested enough to look at it, so I just kind of dropped it at that. But I think we need to look at all aspects, and I agree with you. I think because this isn't a comprehensive plan, it lines up exactly on page 33 with what they've already done. It lines up perfectly. I think it should be considered by the zoning for sure.
Can I get clarification of what you're talking about on page 33 from the city manager? Or this issue, we can just either vote on it or just put it forward and let P and Z look at it and the council look at it. But I guess I'm confused as the reference to the page 33 and the zoning of 3
yeah.
lots.
I believe Walt is referring to the comprehensive plan, and on page 33, there is a
It's very clear.
recommendation. in there.
It's a map of the town, and it's all zoned in residential, SLU district, business district, it's all there, right there. It's kind of like a little map of where the people decided that, or who made up this comprehensive plan decided that that was what fit with the town and laid out perfectly with what they had envisioned. So anyway, that's what's page 33. It's a map.
Okay, all right, I'll look at it later. But for time's sake, shall we either do a vote or just leave it on there and let the other entities look at it later? Because it's gonna come down to when P and Z looks at it and the council looks at it, is justification. And spot zoning is not in our purview. So it's gonna take justification and some of these things, it would be probably good to have justification for several things, for the ease of these to go through the committee process, the P and Z and the council. But either way, if we can move on, I only have a short amount of time and I applaud everyone for your hard work, but I've got about 20 minutes and I have to go.
Okay, let's move on then. Evaluate other districts for name changes and if they should be combined.
I think that was back to the same thing is just condensing things to make the table a little easier to read and take out unnecessary things if this permitted uses were the same. I think it's just a clerical.
Combining like
Yeah.
hotel,
Yeah.
lodge or whatever it was and.
Is that what
Or-
that one's intent was, or was this one the one that we were
I think-
combining? There was like
There's
a
a
couple of
couple
these that everything was
Okay.
the same. I thought. After we made some changes, but maybe
Okay, maybe we need to be more specific then.
Are we just restating that we wanted to rename commercial business district? Is that
No.
what this one is?
No.
No,
Decide with other districts for any changes. And if, I think that there was like two of these that all of the land uses were exactly the same, or maybe there was three of them that everything was the same that was permitted after we had went through and said, yes, we agree that this should be permitted. And so basically what all it would do is just make the table a little bit smaller.
And that's done in the example, so maybe that line doesn't even need to be in there. We could just take the line out.
Yeah. And that's what I understood that to be, but I could be.
I actually think that might have been my note that snuck in there because I was thinking about the commercial district versus business district versus commercial residential district and the differerences or lack of them in the districts and that that's probably a direction. That is the direction I've heard from council is to evaluate all of the zones in the future. I think that was along those lines, but it can be removed if it's not from the group. That one might be more. One of my notes is slipped in there. So.
Okay, so we're gonna strike that. And then the next is include mobile food truck and or mobile business land use on the table or as its own section in Title 18. Where? Okay, I see what you mean.
So it's again, it's a generalization.
Right.
Because I think in the discussion, it was talked about, I think there was an example of a community, maybe it was sewer that has just a full section in their
Mhm.
code that's dedicated to mobile business, or if it's just a general definition. I also think this was one of the topics that the group was like, this is not necessarily in our purview to make that decision, but that it should be potentially evaluated, but maybe I'm misspeaking here. So unless you guys want to provide more detail on it, I think the intent was just that that there should be an evaluation of what that would look like for Title 18.
Right, and adding that because
Yeah.
as long as there is, as long as you do have sewer and water, a mobile food truck is a business and could be used on the property as an ongoing business. So,
Right.
yeah, I remember that discussion and I think it's an important one because we've seen that before and so it needs to be addressed.
Right, but it might not just be as simple as just a definition, so. It could.
Leave it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Leave it in there. Okay.
All right, moving on to definition, land use recommendations. Combine definitions for use and principal use or structure.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these were streamlining and trying to reduce some duplicative things in there.
And we're,
Looks like.
Words.
I agree.
Can we, if anybody has one that they would like to discuss, bring it up, or do we need to go through each of them?
I don't think it-
Like
I
they
would
all look
suggest
good.
that if everybody kind of cruise through real quick, and if you have anything that strikes, that stands out to you that you would like to discuss, that we go that route. I know there was a couple of these meetings that not everybody was able to make it, and there were the things that were,
Are you talking about definitions at large on this whole section?
well, yeah,
So
I
the-
had something to add then. I was hoping that under the next page where it says consider including short-term rentals in the land use table as permitted use. This is the meeting I was gone for because I was up at training for the post office in Anchorage. So I'm not entirely sure how that meeting went. I hope it went well. And I just wanted to add, consider a minimum requirement of days in operation and or a permit process that caps the total properties in short-term rental in the commercial business district. And just the reasoning behind that being that this is gonna protect the city from having to police unclear regulations. I think it's a little bit of a loophole if somebody comes in, like I said, and wants to create their living, their primary residence downtown, and they use nightly rentals as an excuse to do that. I think that's something that you guys evaluated down here when you said, what is being in business? What is an active business? And do we have a minimum number of operating day requirements? So certainly this could be addressed in a multitude of ways. I just think it's something that is worth looking at and them looking at up higher up.
So I think we did discuss it in that meeting, and we were talking about all businesses, not just short-term rentals. And wanting businesses to be active and what that looked like. Because we can't force people to lose money or make money, but we want them to be actively participating in their business. Right? We don't have control over their income one way or the other, but we weren't specifically pulling out short-term rentals. We were talking about all of the businesses that are active in the community, because right now to be in the commercial business district, you need to have a business, but people could say their business is X, Y, and Z and get away with having their full-time residence, but having a business. Regardless of whether it's a short-term rental or not.
And I think that is very logical, because I don't think as of now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have any definement of an active business.
We don't, that's one of the definitions we were working on.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think why it feels like a sticky spot to me is because most businesses you would open downtown, you would have to retain a certain amount of space within your home to operate it. You'd have to make certain changes to a residence to have it operate as a business. But if you're operating it as a nightly rental, you don't have to really make many changes to a residence at all. So somebody could come in and purchase the home and live in it. And if we don't have any requirements for how many days they need to operate, they could operate for 1 day a year. And if that's not something that the general public would want to happen in the commercial business district, we might want to have a regulatory policy to protect against that. That's all I'm saying.
Elaine, I'm sorry, Elaine, if you're done, thank you for staying on top of this, but what's your consideration, what you would like to add under the examples where it talks about short-term rental unit, owner occupied, and then has short-term rental and then a definition. Is that where you were thinking what you were adding to would go in there? Have you read what's written in there? Short-term rental.
Are you talking about where it has the definition for short-term rental?
Yeah, include definitions of land on the land use table. Is that something that that we could add there, or?
I was thinking after where there's a bullet point after that says consider including short-term rentals in the land use table as a permitted use.
Oh, I see.
It just, something to consider going forward to make sure that the commercial business district stays healthy.
Right, and the definition that we've got up there, short-term rental residence that is generally rented for less than 30 consecutive calendar days. Typically, short-term rentals are booked for a few days or a few weeks. The rental comes fully furnished. The tenants do not pay for expenses like utilities. Generally, any rental under a 6-month period is considered short-term. Is that agreeable to what you were thinking? And then if you were to add, and tell me what you wanted to add on, I read it, but I can't pull it up right now, Elena.
Okay, yeah, I said nightly rentals, and maybe what I meant to say was short-term rentals. I like these definitions. Obviously, somebody put work into this and it looks great. I like this change a lot. All I am asking for is a one sentence. Consider using a minimum days requirement for
Mhm.
short-term rentals or a permit process that caps the total number of properties allowed to be in short-term rental in the commercial business district.
Right. And thank you for your persistence with this. I appreciate it, Elena.
So, my thought to that is, I think that we cover that when we come up with a definition for in business, because we're kind of singling out one thing, and I think that this is where everybody kind of gets their hackles up. Because what would be the difference between that or somebody saying, I'm gonna open a tax office, and they're open 2 days, maybe even a month district. That's completely permitted with no additional regulation about how many days they have to be open or what they have to do. So how is, I just think that you can't allow, and I'm probably the wrong person to be speaking about this just because that's what I have as nightly rentals, but singling out nightly rentals from what is perceived to be this potential problem that I understand, but it's not just nightly rentals. Somebody could open up an office and just open it 1 day a week, but then that would be okay, or 1 day a year, 5 days a year, but that would be okay versus somebody having a nightly rental. So I think you cover that, that's only open 5 days a year by coming up with your definition of in business and what we're requiring that, so that we're not taking one thing of the nightly rentals, we're using it's across the board, whether you're an office, a nightly rentals, a store, a gift shop, whatever, it's still the same. If they're only open 1 or 2 days out of the year, is that in business? The same as a nightly rental.
We want the same thing for the community.
Yeah.
We want businesses to be active and we don't want people jumping through loopholes. So we're trying to take it away from people that would just use nightly rentals or short-term rentals as the scapegoat. They might use a different business as a scapegoat to do the same thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I love this, that as an addition. And as I said, I think nightly short-term rentals could be a really wonderful way to add to the commercial business district. I just think taking some time to word things correctly and add the protections, policies in place that need to be there to make sure that everybody is clear when they read the zoning district land use table, so you don't walk into sticky situations.
So you guys are right on target. It is highlighted in here because that was one of the questions that I had left after these discussions is what does it mean to be in business or active in business? And I think we kind of left that off at the last meeting. I agree with it covering the basis of everybody. And it's not even just that district, it's everybody in the community, right? If you're active and you're in a business, what does that mean for the community? Because we have seen historically other situations that were not short-term rental related that have had similar issues. So I don't know if that's something that you guys want to delve into as a group during this meeting to kind of set up some general parameters or ideas. But certainly I think that's great that we do have impacted business owners sitting in the room that could give some ideas of what they think would be a reasonable request or desire to see out of people operating in that area.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Vivian.
Oh, I was just gonna say, good point. Dawn, you made some good points about all businesses being at the same level of what is being in business and active in business. And that is a definition that we tried to come around last time, but it's, as our city manager just said, vital that we come up with a description or a definition that can embrace what does that mean, and it applies to all businesses. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So that is the hard part because I think that the last meeting I've missed one, or two maybe. But we were gonna come up with definitions. Very first thing about what is the definition of in business. And what gets so hard about that is you can come up with a very generic dictionary in business. But what good does it do? Because how do you enforce the in business? So it kind of is catch-22. You have to have both things. But once you start talking enforcement instead of incentive, what's the
Incentivization.
okay, if that's a word, incentivization. You get yourself in trouble because it's in business means so many things and it can be so many different things. And so
Yeah,
let's talk about incentivizing and getting, because the enforcement, no matter what, we all have to agree that has never worked. So then when something continues to not work and you just continue to rehash that, it's the definition of insanity. So let's try something different. Let's try incentivizing things.
so what are we incentivizing? What's the dream?
People to be in business. So maybe they're.
Meaning what?
Hmm?
Meaning
Um,
what?
We still.
They're
we don't-
bringing in an income to this community.
Yes. Taxable.
Taxable income, good,
So there was a spot here, thank you, Walt, on page 33. Where I had made a note of something that they had come up with in the, what do you call this? In the comprehensive plan. And it says, the concept presented here is to create special tax incentives for the waterfront commercial district or business district, such as a property or sales tax rebate on the basis of meeting specific criteria. Walk-in business, open to the public, sales are generated at least 10 months of the year, an annual sales tax threshold of $1,000, et cetera. At the same time, upper story residential accommodations are encouraged. And this was in 2014. So the $1,000 may be different now. 10 years later. But it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
It's not.
oh no, I totally think it is. I've actually come up with a couple ideas, which is outside of this meeting, but how to incentivize businesses, but I don't think that this is the place to share those or to get into those discussions, or we'll never get through this, but
Do you have definitions for being in business?
I do.
But let's hear those.
Okay. I have to find them.
We missed you last meeting when we were going through this.
How many did I miss while I was being a grandbaby?
Don, I'm pulling it up. I made a extensive list of my ideas when I was hearing around the table that incentivization. It's a real word now.
We added to the dictionary.
What is it? What the businesses are looking for, so I will maybe add to what you share.
Oh, I actually believe that a good place for that kind of, in my opinion, for any of those kind of thoughts or ideas is to achieve the actual chamber or maybe to the city, to take those for city council. I think that they're looking for those types of ideas. Aren't they? Business incentive ideas.
Yeah, we'll be having a discussion, or council will be having a discussion on that at their upcoming work session for that budget. So they're in the budget cycle right now. If you have ideas, definitely bring them forward.
Can I
I'm not
stop us
thinking
for a
myself right now. I have too many papers, but I have this.
Can I stop? Yes, Vivian needs to go, so. Vivian, was there anything else, I'm sorry, that you absolutely wanted to see us discuss right now before you have to go?
No, that's fine. Thank you. And again, thank you for everyone for your hard work on this. But no, I'll see it again with council, but thank you so much for all your hard work.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Vivian.
I was looking so much during Zoom, so I could share them.
Do you want to share the video?
You want me to share?
I asked for one quick clarification when we're talking about nightly rentals and short-term cabin rentals. Is there much difference?
No,
Okay. What about a lodge? Is that?
no,
nightly rentals?
yeah.
No, so that was why that was part of your guys' recommendation was to remove lodge night, okay, where does it say? It says remove.
The bottom of the page, bottom line.
Cabin rentals, hostels and lodge from land use table there and included as short-term rentals.
Oh, I guess that's my point is if a lodge is nightly rental, so we're gonna limit the amount of rooms that we would propose it, then we need to put one of those little things under lodge, like permitted by permits only and only so many.
We would.
Is that where you're talking?
We have that for our long-term residential.
I get that, but if we do it to nightly rentals, are we gonna have to put that same wording in lodge and we're gonna?
We
Change.
voted to have short-term rentals as permitted in the commercial business district.
Yeah, we currently do. I'm talking about.
No, we don't
currently,
currently,
no.
but
If we,
as a group, we decided in one of the meetings to allow it as a permitted. Elena was just asking for extra reinforcements and that might be an option to go through a permitting process.
because it is gonna cause a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And then, I guess my opinion is I think we ought to let the market seek its own level on nightly rentals. If the market's there,
Right.
good, if not, it'll seek its own level. Just my take.
So I found the definitions and business and leading and commerce. So is any for-profit activity formed for ongoing conduct of lawful business that involves providing goods and services for purchase to the public, the practice of making one's living by a person, regular occupation or trade. Another definition is an activity conducted to provide goods or services. It includes the activity done outside of manufacturing or producing the products. Commercial business can also include use of land or business for business activities such as retail stores. So those are the definitions of in business in the Webster's dictionary. So
That it doesn't say you have to be doing that for a certain period of time
no,
a year.
and how could you define that really? It's
We had talked about in one of the meetings, having a 3-month minimum for Sylvania of being in business. And you could pick whatever those 3 months are. A lot of the businesses in Sylvania would probably use for summer months, but not requiring our businesses to be open year round or 10 months out of the year. But having a minimum amount of being in business.
it all gets rough when you start, it's back to, right, you need to figure out ways to encourage people to have their doors open and to be in business, because regulating that and enforcing that is a virtually impossible task that puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And so the things that if the more you bring in, there's some incentive for you to stay open. The more money, the more resources you bring to our community, then we're going to get something back. Because on the flip side of that, it's not just the business's responsibility to make sure that they are producing something, but it's the people within our community's responsibility to make sure that they're supporting that. Because it can be so one-sided. When you have the businesses that have the cost of operating a business, for the good of the people within the community, then the people within the community need to reciprocate that for those businesses to help encourage. And how do you do that as a city and as residents of this community?
Right.
So I'm back to enforcement doesn't always work.
So I have pulled up on the screen the page 33 that both Walt and Nicole are mentioning that has the concept presented to create special tax incentives. So, and I did email that out to the group.
So sent the tax kind of thought process that is extremely draft that I put together for that exact actually thought process about based on how much revenue you bring. A percentage of that, which is easily documentable, comes back around to the business. Somehow so that they get some benefit for the more revenue they bring in, the more business they produce.
The larger the tax break.
Right, well,
Or
and
utility
you
break
get-
or.
Right, you get some sort of incentive to toward something else. I'm not sure, and again, that this is the place for that, but you get something back either in a discount on property tax or something like that, or so that the money really never leaves the community. Or you just get a percentage of that tax revenue back to theoretically put back into your business. Because you're making money for the city. And for the improvements and all of the things the city offers. So the more of that you do, some of that maybe can come back around to you to keep building your business. That's kind of the part of the thought process, but exactly where that money goes or how you would do that. I mean, that's diving into other things that maybe aren't for this. But I think they're super good discussions, and I think that the things that should be discussed at Chamber of Commerce. And so when I say that, maybe one of the things is that you own a property that is in the business district, you have to be part of, you have to have a business license no matter what. You have to pay for that business license. And you also have to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce with that. Because you have to have a sales tax ID. And you have to have a sales tax ID, and you have to go through all the same things that people that are actively in business have to do, pay for, paperwork, the whole 9 yards. And so.
What do you do though
easily-
if somebody's not doing it? So you're back to that same thing. What if, somebody down the street is sitting there with their doors shut and has been for years and they haven't done all these things? What's the recourse for them for not doing it?
I don't know what the recourse is, and I completely agree with that, but the one thing is it is definitely a specific thing. You have to have a business license, you have to actively have that, you have to actively pay for being part of the Chamber of Commerce. So there's things you're not trying to decide, are you in business or are you not, based on the hours you work or what business you are. And it's not that much, but at least it's encouraging participation.
So I don't know how we would enforce somebody being a part of the Chamber of Commerce, because not all businesses are. But currently in the district, everybody who is in the district does get a commercial water and sewer utility rate, because they are supposed to be a commercial entity, and they are supposed to have a commercial business license. Or a business license, not commercial. And you'd be surprised how many people have business license, but it doesn't mean they're active. So,
Right.
I mean, that could be included, but it's.
And I'm not saying, I was just, when I was saying about when I brought up the chamber, I'm like, and I don't know how you make people do that, except for you are trying to make them do other things, but I don't know how you make them do it. So, maybe it's instead of making them do it as when you.
Maybe what you want to do is add another bullet that says strongly consider incentivizing. And maybe possibly even add bullet points under that with ideas for your ideas for what that would mean. I think it's definitely important. I think the climate of between the city and the businesses in the town needs to be positive. We want people to come in and have businesses, and we want them to feel like this city is such a great place to work with. And I know this team is great, and they're working towards getting everything hashed out on this land use table, so it is so much easier for everybody to understand. This is the first step. And I think what you're talking about is also the first step. There needs to be so many ideas on the table for how to create a climate of positivity for business and so forth. And we came up with a lot of ideas even beyond tax breaks from the city. I mean, we were talking about a shoulder season, maybe pairing with SVT and the ferry that they operate, considerations for a fall and spring season. And we came up with a lot more ideas. And if we want to delve into this further, I did write a lot of them down and have some further ideas. And I'm sure what group was going to be talking about this further.
So we're in the budget cycle right now for the Philadelphia City Council. And that's when they consider, because all of these items become budgetary items.
Yeah.
So that's the consideration is what goes into the budget and how that is outlined. They have in the past, and actually in 2020, well, it was introduced in 2019 and it was supposed to go into effect in 2020. They had a water and sewer incentivization program, the city council did, where businesses that operated more than 3 months out of the year received a free month of water and sewer. Unfortunately, that hit right at 2020, so nobody was able to take advantage of that incentive. And then there was a period of realization after that or more understanding when the budget changed to a budget narrative about what the condition of the city's finances were. And while they have every year, there are gains made to be in a to be out of that deficit and have an improved financial outlook. We're just now making that, hitting that crest. And so that'll be part of the discussion coming up is what the assigned funds or the assigned revenues already are, like the 2% that goes to the sales tax. There's just, we don't need to dive into this. I could talk budget all day. But part of that is, how are funds assigned and what benefits can be given back to the city and to the community, more specifically to the community. And that's something that the council's provided direction that they would like to hear is incentives for businesses. So if you don't want to talk about them as a group, and then maybe that's out of the purview, if you give them to me, we can pass them along as we're part of those discussions, or you can come to them.
To the city council.
Yes, to the city council. I think it might be helpful to have somewhere in the, this part.
Definition in the definitions.
Yeah, for the commercial business district to have maybe, I don't know what you would call it, but maybe like an expectations for being in this district. Like, we expect you to be in business.
Ooh.
I don't know what that looks like, but when I'm purchasing properties and I'm like, oh, what district is this? Like, what can I do here? What am I required to do here? Like, what does that look like? Depending on where. I don't know if it said. I mean, it tells me what you're allowed to do, but it didn't tell me what I was expected to do. So when people are looking at purchasing a property in this district, they can be like, oh, okay, well, if I move to Seldovia, I'm expected to have this business operating. Like, I'm expected to be in business, not just own this property. And maybe I could be in business or not. I don't know. So like, have a sales tax registration, have an Alaska business license, a city of Seldovia business license. Like a spot where those things would go because you're in this district.
I think that's a great idea.
Uh-huh.
And I think the chamber is kind of coming around and doing well. But if you were in business someplace, it's almost your responsibility to participate in the things that
Help your business.
help everybody's business, because I've heard it time and time again about that. And I'm not even doing a plug just for the chamber, it's for lots of things. Well, what does that do for me? It's not about me, it's about something might not specifically help you, but when there's everybody's participating, it helps everybody. And so your different businesses wouldn't be as successful, even though they don't see how it is that this one thing supports them. But it really does, because if you don't have an active community and an active business community, then those people that can't see how the walking map or how something like that, well, I don't get any business from that. Well, that's not true. You get business from that in a roundabout way, because if our town wasn't successful, then your business wouldn't be successful. And pretty soon what happens is you get 3 or 4 different people that are really actively participating, and this is how you get the burnout, because that small group of people is really participating, and so everybody is kind of getting the benefit of that participation without everybody participating. So the more people you have, the less burden there is on a smaller group of people, and then you don't get the burnout. So it's the thing, if everybody in the business district had to actively participate, and I know you can't make them do this, and say the Chamber of Commerce, or actively participate in the city.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even want to put that in code because
No.
the status changes on everything, but you could put under expectations, that they do have to have a sales tax registration. And as a city, the chamber did reach out and asked if we would partner with the chamber to help send out letters from membership. And that is something that we're fully prepared to do. In fact, we have a second renewal notice period coming up in the next couple of weeks. If that's too soon, then we'll work on it again in December. But even just having those letters at the office, because we do have people come in throughout the year and fill out business license that we can pass along and we can encourage it. But I don't know that should be in code.
I think.
I wasn't. I don't think it should be in code either.
Okay.
Nor do I think that you should try to enforce people to be in business, because you can't even define in business. So I'm the same way on both things. That wasn't my intent, other than I think that your idea about these are the things that are.
It's not required, but we're
Right.
expected that you are operating a business in the business district.
If perhaps what you're thinking is like once a year, twice a year, the city mails something out, like she's saying about the Chamber of Commerce, but included in that would be, what does it mean to live in the commercial business district? And after that, help us help you, and a list of things of how the city is working with you. It's for the sake of clarity and understanding what it means to live in this club. Is that what you're saying?
No. But that sounds cool.
Okay. I'm not following that.
Okay, but you say we can't define being in business, but I think you did have some great definitions, and we can maybe put some of those recommendations forward of what being in business is, or being active in business, what a business is. That way there are guidelines moving forward on what that looks like. So if you don't mind, you can include those definitions that you gave. Okay. And that can go forward in the recommendation.
I think I sent them in an email.
I thought I looked for them at the last meeting and I couldn't find them, so I thought you did too. But if you send them again, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, do we feel like we're done within business? And active in business? Can we move on.
We did have a couple definitions we had two definitions for short-term, or three definitions for a short-term rental, and what those are, and I don't know if we wanted to narrow that down. Which page is on?
Page two. I think they're all really good, and I would trust the planning and zoning to pick the right ones and say, hey, this is the best one out of the bunch.
Where is that at?
On the bottom of page
Page
two.
two, page two.
Under examples.
Okay.
I would agree that I like the options given because there's significant differences between them, you know, short term could mean 30 days, short term could mean anything under 6 months. So there's definitely decisions to be made here if we decide to, you know, change the land use table to short term and long term.
I would just say as a staff person that I would highly recommend that it stick to the 30 days because that's consistent with the borough and the state. Yeah, that's how we have to bill sales tax. And so I would just, you know, generally under 6 months, maybe that's okay to keep that language. But even then, I would really hesitate on including that. Including that when 30 days is the permittable term. It's the usable term in the industry.
And that is how we have to, like,
Yeah.
short-term rental folks, that is how we have to do our sales taxes. They're over 30 days, they only get taxed on once.
Okay, so perhaps do we just want to strike that one sentence that says generally any rental under 6 month period is considered short term? I think if we just removed that, everything else would still. Okay. But then the long-term definition would have to change because the long-term says the time period between 6 months to a year.
So they're for the lease, it's like a general lease.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
anything is,
And it could even just say leases typically range from 1 month.
Yeah, we would maybe change that to 1 month to a year.
There's one definition there I think should just go away. The second one, an owner occupied short-term rental unit means a short-term rental unit such that the dwelling is owner or tenant primary residence. Short-term primary residence, that doesn't jive, so I think it's just scratch that one.
Wait, but you could have somebody living in the downstairs or upstairs and have the other part of the building be a short-term rental.
Could. Yeah,
But it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
that's just really confusing.
right, because we permit that. So we don't need that.
It's redundant.
So it's just for the long-term rentals of your residence that is rented to a tenant for. You should residence be dwellings, if that's the word we're using.
Maybe that should be, that is listed in here, consideration of these are dwelling unit or resident.
Right. So I think we need to choose a word because we have two different ones there. That's a recommendation, and then that is rented to a tenant, for instance, is rented to a tenant in excess of 30 days. Is that for long term?
Yeah.
So for the residence, you're just gonna come up with whether we're gonna use the word residence or dwelling.
Yeah, it states that under the Bid. Bullet point, evaluate definitions of dwelling unit and residence, consider terminology for residence or residential instead. So, once you guys wanna decide on what we'll move that to the planning commission.
I think I like the word. If we're gonna use one dwelling, because resident. I think I like the word dwelling. Do I like the word? dwelling?
Last time you liked the word resident.
Yeah, I was gonna say, last time it was the other.
Why? There was a reason why. I remember that. What was my reason? Why are you doing this? Do you have me something? No.
Okay, that's weird. Okay, that's what.
Oh, I think it was because if you had
Well, I like
multiple units for short-term rentals within one larger unit, each of those could be considered a dwelling. So I think
I don't know, I'm
that's why it
looking
got
it up.
confusing.
Because now I remember us talking about that, and I remember going back and forth then, and I know there's a recording of me, so I could be in deep trouble.
I remember talking about if there's a kitchen space, you can cook and it's in a
Yeah, we were
bathroom,
getting
then
rid
it's
of all of
considered a
that.
dwelling.
Yeah,
Whether
the
it had-
kitchen spaces doesn't, I
Does
remember,
not
so
pertain.
what is it, maybe I think she's on to something, because I think that was why I didn't like the word dwelling, and I liked the word residence. A home, abode, or place where an individual is actually living at a specific point in time. So then that does not, living, that doesn't work for the definition of a residence. For short-term rentals, if they're not actually. Is that living? Heidi hacks. You have it. Dwelling meaning for one or more rooms in addition to a bathroom. Maybe we need to come up with a completely different word. No. No, I'm serious, because you can rent something and stay in it for longer than 30 days without a kitchen.
So we can evaluate the definition of dwelling unit for whether a kitchen needs to be included.
Okay, there was a reason that it's not.
Yeah, we had.
I'm wishy-washy, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't mean to confuse things more, but I don't think we should have both. Just not sure which one's better.
Well, it sounds like we may need both, because one is considered the living in and the other is for a short-term stay, so.
But which one of those is for a short term?
Maybe not residence, because that's the living in, so that's where the second term would come in, right? And if we look at, let's just Google.
Generally, it's a dwelling unit, it's something that can be
Why
used
can't we
as a
just say
residence.
short-term rental?
Okay.
I like that. See?
For the National Electric Code, a dwelling unit is a single unit providing complete and independent living facilities for one or more persons. Living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. So there must be another word.
I have somewhere, so I'm not being on, I promise.
A building. It's a building that's rented to a.
How about transient?
Transient?
like
It's an
transient?
awful word.
Transient.
Dare call me a transient.
Just call it a place.
Transient means you come, okay. So you.
I thought the whole kitchen discussion was that
That's the awful
it's
word.
okay to have a kitchen regardless. You don't have to have one, but it's okay. It's like, I thought it was like, we weren't gonna be so specific.
Right.
Yeah, so.
So we're just taking that stuff out.
Yeah.
So short term, long term.
Yep.
Rain.
Okay, so in the land use table currently, they have a dwelling unit and it's attached residential. Or dwelling unit attached multi-residential. So how have we?
I thought we hashed all this out.
Yeah,
So we took out residential, we just have dwelling unit, structures containing 4 or less units, structures,
we're combining those two.
right?
So there's accessory use of structures and then dwelling unit or residence or residential use, because we didn't land on one. And then dwelling units, structures containing 4 or less units, dwelling units, structures containing 5 or more. And those are left in there because of the International Building Code.
How about lodging? Long-term lodging, short-term lodging? Does that work?
You were looking at the long-term rental
It's a
definition where it says
residence.
a residence that is rented.
But you're picking apart the dwelling unit and residence, those 2 words.
You are.
Right, which neither one of them.
No.
And that's why lodging was in there, and that's why lodging worked.
You could even just go to generic as accommodation, a temporary accommodation
For long-term accommodation,
or long-term
I like
accommodation.
that. I like that. That's a whole new word.
Next time you'll be like, I don't like that word.
Do you want to do, we could put just living quarter in there.
Not living.
No, I like accommodation. Right now, today. Accommodation. Long-term and short-term accommodation.
I like short-term and long-term much better than what we had before. I think it's a great improvement. Say that. Good job.
So apparently we need to go through each slide.
So short-term accommodation, according to Law Insider, means a building designed or used or designed or intended for use as a temporary rental sleeping accommodation.
Okay.
That works for both short and long term.
Well, I think
Because
long,
residential then would be somebody that lived there, I mean, it's still a short term, even it's still.
Residential use.
Yeah.
so
So
short-term
residential.
accommodation and long-term accommodation.
I think it works.
Same text there. Right.
I like that because then if he was talking about like a hostel situation or, you know, anything like a studio or.
Hostel is far worse than transient.
Barely. Well, we're both.
I don't like it as much.
Hostels hold transients.
No, but you're hostile.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Okay, chic.
I want this to stop.
So what are we gonna use? Short-term accommodation.
This week.
You aren't getting another week.
They're on cancels that, you can change your mind again.
Like, where are you putting that in? Short-term accommodation.
Did we evaluate Title 13 for occupancy? That's
you?
That's me.
Okay.
Because if we're including occupancy, it needs to relate back to Title 13. That's where our occupancy regulations come into play with water and sewer. Because you may not have to offer a kitchen, but you do have to offer a bathroom.
Right, that's what I was just looking at. So we also, because we just went through this short-term, long-term rental. Evaluate definitions for dwelling unit, and residence, consider terminology. Can we just put that as accommodation, right? Isn't that what we just decided?
Yep.
Okay, I have a question on here. On page 3 of 6 near the top, it says include a definition for bed and breakfast, include as a secondary use on the land table for the commercial business district, and we give an example for our definition. I would ask to strike that because I thought we were doing short-term accommodations and long-term accommodations, so
Bed and breakfast fall under a completely different state regulation.
do they?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why.
That's why
it's
they're
its own
like
area.
separate.
That would be the owner occupied piece of it.
Okay,
And also because of the food service that's provided, and so like the state of Alaska has a 33-page specific requirements for
Okay.
bed and breakfast, and it
Okay.
has to do with occupancy along with that they serve food within the residence, and so
Okay.
it's kind of.
thank you for clearing that up. I didn't understand that. Okay, thank you.
And then going back to, not to go way back. Okay, so we have the incentivization, we're adding under generalization. And we can lump that back to page 33, just as an idea. And then expectation, we can just put consider including expectations. Of it being in business under the commercial business district. Okay,
I love that.
put that in there. I think we could even go further and say under the definition of business, like some of the generalizations of what being in business is with sales tax registration. Business license, professional licenses if needed, you know, and just kind of lay that out there when somebody looks like, what is being in business? You know, some of these generalizations included.
That was the idea of the day.
Okay, perfect. So that's in there. Anything else then, as we go down through the list, we'll get the definitions from Dawn through and being in business. And then we don't have to highlight this anymore. And instead of further evaluate being what business and business means for Soldovia. I think we can take that out unless you guys want that in there. Because we're not looking at minimum requirements, we're looking at incentivization. And then that onus goes back on the city to make sure that that happens. Are we on the same page for that? And then we combined several of the use types for what being in business is. You missed that one, Don, but I think you would have been proud of us.
Yeah.
New words. Just taking them out.
No, we just said, if you're in business, this covers all of these categories, except for this handful of things that we don't want in the business district necessarily.
Well, no, it's not that. It's things that have justifications. They have other
Being their own
permitting.
entity.
You know, they have other requirements that need to be evaluated in order for them to conduct business. As being flippant.
And I believe, I believe that's the point where we decided there was a reason that a bar is not listed on the land use table as well.
Yes, because it is considered retail. No, I'm being serious, like when they get their alcohol license, they have either a retail license or they have a package store license, or I think there's one other. But it's.
They just
considered-
changed them all.
Because all the permits and everything are up to them together. It's not,
Yeah,
It's just like a grocery store.
yeah.
I was just laughing because at that meeting, it was like, it's retail.
All right, I got lost. Where are we again?
I think so. We're looking at the definition of everything that's included. Below that, it says evaluate definition of office and business specific office. Possibly include definition for office rentals under definition of business instead. That is definitely a me note right there. Sorry, I peppered them in, but there was a general discussion about it and I don't know that there was any resolution. Professional office is being considered under being in business or a business because you know, vets or tax offices or any of those types of professions with professional license that are operating out of an office. But it was mentioned also that office rentals, because you're renting a space and you are getting an income for renting the space is being a business, right? Is that where we were with that?
Right, I think
Remember?
we felt the definitions were slightly unclear.
Yeah. So we can work on adjusting those.
Right, we didn't want someone, so I gave the example of I have this building. And we have other businesses, so I could be operating my fishing office out of this building. I could also live there, I could do whatever, but I would be in business because I have my business office there. Well, we don't really want that specifically, but if we were renting the spaces out for other people to have offices in there, like the city does, like that was okay. Make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense, but it's oof.
If you get on that building and you're still running those businesses and you want to go rent a place over here to run those businesses.
Yeah.
Yes. But me as the owner of
Right.
the building,
So what you're saying is you shouldn't be able to do one, but you could rent it.
we could do another.
If someone
I'm
else
doing
owned
it
it,
for
you could
profit.
still run the
I'm
same
renting the
office.
space for profit.
Right there is where you got it. You hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head. You're doing it for a profit. And so when we come up with the definition of in business,
Mhm.
which neither one of these really specifically said, but I think it's what needs to be in there. And for profit, but then you have the thing, what if somebody wants to open a nonprofit? So.
There is
We'll work on
a land use
Yeah.
table and it was okay in business district. The land nonprofits, they're
Yeah,
listed,
right.
so.
So then you gotta be careful with that.
That might just be separate.
Yeah. But yeah, it's for the,
Are nonprofits listed? I
I
thought they
saw it somewhere.
fall under, I mean, they might just fall under business.
They would unless we put in there for profit, in which
Right,
case
so
we
that's
have
what
to
I
make a
was
distinction.
saying as becomes the issue with adding that to the business definition. So it's just.
Well, it could just be like business means for a profit or a nonprofit entity engaging. So then in business is engaging. Obviously, we still need to workshop that a little bit, but we'll get
Yeah.
those from you.
If we wanna try, yeah.
Yeah. So does that work there? Then office rentals under definition of business. And then we talked about your economy of scale for heavy equipment or small equipment under equipment sales and repairs and services. As well as manufacturing. There was one more.
Storage.
Wholesale outlet by moving, outlet. So maybe take a few minutes to read through the last minute ones and see if there's anything else you guys want to amend.
You had seafood processing too, for consideration for a scaled,
For what?
For scale.
for
For
scale,
scale, yeah.
was one of the other ones.
Okay. Any other notes then? Any more moments? So with the. Right, thank you, so with this, if there aren't any other notes, then I think it's up to the group on, we can take these changes back. And make them, and we can send them out to the group. And if you have any feedback, you can provide it to us. Or we can come back for another meeting and just make sure we run through it. I leave that up to you guys on if you feel like we need to meet again, or if you just want to see it in an email form, and then if there's anything egregious, come back for a meeting. But whatever you guys works best for you guys.
You send out the email as a CCL.
It would have to be a BCC, so it's not a meeting. But if somebody came back and said, you know, hey, I really don't like this, or this should change, then we can schedule a meeting.
Yeah, if they do that, I think that would be.
I thought this was laid out really nicely. It was really easy to read. It was really easy to go through, and so I can see where, you know, unless we, like you said, find something really that you did, you know, we didn't agree to, or there were some mistakes or something, we can
Just let
go
us
from
know.
there, email you back and say, I didn't get that part or whatever, and then you can decide whether to have another meeting about it or feedback from everybody.
Yeah.
That it's okay. I'll read through it. Now, if I like, I think it's great. I'll just send an email and say, I like it. Or whatever.
Does that work for everybody? And then it would go to the planning commission next, so we'll let you guys know when that's happening. So the one thing I will point out, because we talked about this document, I should have pointed out in the beginning, I apologize, is that we talked about definitions a lot tonight, but that wasn't something that we did deep dive in here. So as long as that's okay with the group, when we're standing, it's generalized recommendations, some land use table recommendations. There will be some more vetting process during the planning commission process on those definitions. Once you guys want to do it. I'm just making sure, clarifying with the group that not doing the full deep dive on definitions is the generalized recommendations is okay with the group the way they are now. And you don't want to go further into definitions, because that wasn't one thing that we did in this report, is we left it generalized.
Is that something that the planning and zoning would find beneficial for us to do? Or is that something that planning and zoning is used to doing? Better.
I guess that's what we normally do, but I would like to invite anybody to attend planning and zoning meetings if you feel like you want to have your input.
And good plug, there is one seat open.
That's
So,
right.
in case anybody really just likes to get their meetings on. We,
Really likes to deep dive into definition.
that's where that'll happen. We could use they could use another planning commission.
So you'll be a volunteer for the spot on that zoning meeting?
Do you want to? We'll. Then a letter of
I think,
interest, Walt.
I think I frustrate you gals enough.
No, if you were interested, definitely submit a letter of interest. It goes to the mayor for his approval and then confirmation by the council. So we do need another person. Think about it.
You bring an educated.
You know, my problem is it's frustrating because I hear just about enough to get me in trouble. Is it, especially when that fan comes on.
We'll
it's
get you
just
some ear
Really
pops.
impossible.
Ear pops.
All right, so everything looks good. We're gonna hand it over to you guys, I think, and then go from there, wait for an email. All right, so let's open this up to public comment. And then Henry, did you have anything? No? Okay. Anybody else? Any? Okay. Are we ready to adjourn? All right.
You have to make a motion.
Now it's a work session.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.